Hello and welcome to this BFDG podcast. I'm Jonathan Green, chair of the BFDG, and this is another podcast in the series of interviews with winners of our BFDG Awards 2026. The British Film Designers Guild is a growing community of around 700 amazing creatives and production designers working across film, TV, commercials, and music videos. This year, the Guild is celebrating its 80th anniversary, originally set up to raise the profile of the art department and support its members, and those values are very much at the heart of what we do today. You can find out more information at britishfilmdesigners.com. And today, I'm delighted to be talking to the winner of the Best Production Design in a Commercial for Schweppes Take Your Time Mission to Mars. And I'm joined today by production designer Will Htay. Will, welcome and congratulations on your award.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Thank you. Thanks for asking me along.
Oh, no, this is going to be great. I'm really looking forward to this. So I generally like to start these podcasts by finding out a little bit about my guest. And so could you just give us a little overview of your career and maybe tell us how you started in the industry?
Yeah, sure. I very odd background. I was going to be an astronaut and decided against it. And I had a place at university and to do astronautical engineering.
Wow.
And at the same time, I had a real love of film, and I did art in my as my fourth A level. Applied to art school, got took a year out in order to do that actually, and then applied to degree and foundation, got both, went straight to degree, went to Wimbledon School of Art with many alumni in the film and TV and obviously theatre business as well. Had a fantastic time there, had an amazing tutor called Will Htay, who is the fairy godmother to the art department and the British film industry.
A member of the
And
guild.
I started off actually doing some theatre jobs, assisting, and then I just sort of worked my way up. I was going to go to the Royal College, and my Moira and various other people said, "Don't go and work. You're good enough to work. Start at the bottom," and which is what I did, and just worked on various jobs. And then I got a call saying, "Actually, you should go to the Royal College because Adrian Smith is tutoring. They're short of a designer." So I did that, and then worked with Adrian Smith. He was production designing, and I worked with people like Paul Kirby at the time, who was his art director, and then came back to London. Was introduced to a friend who said, "Hey, we hear that you are designing. Could you look at this pop video?" And I designed the pop video, and then went very quickly into doing commercials. And that basically was the beginning of my career. And I kind of missed out on doing big film and TV. I kind of got diverted into, even though I started with big TV stuff, I and trying to get into film. I didn't know anyone in film. My first job offer was The Fifth Element, Luc Besson's Fifth Element, and I turned it down because I had 6 weeks until I graduated. I knew
Wow.
nothing about the film industry. Yeah, and then I've just worked my way up doing lots of TV ads and music videos, and then went to see a few people with my portfolio. Got a bit fed up with commercials and wanted to do some long form. Took my portfolio around old school and met a few people and just started working on big features. And I went in as an art director, but they all the positions were closed. But they loved. In fact, it was for Nigel Phelps and John Billington on World War Z. They loved my drawings so much. They were like, "Would you consider doing sort of concept illustration and concept design?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." It was an in. I'd learnt my lesson. Somebody opens a door, walk through it. So yeah, and then for the past few years, I've done both. I've designed commercials, worked on features as a concept designer, and also started designing features as well, and TV stuff. So yeah, I kind of do a bit of everything.
Brilliant. I mean, those pop video genres are so great for training, aren't they? And for learning the craft. And you get to do, you can be creative. You generally have very little money to play with, so it makes you more inventive. I just think they're a really great training ground for people getting into the industry.
I'd agree, but I do think that's also where we learn another lesson, which I think is a very bad lesson in the art department, which is because you're creative and you're in a talent pool of creative people, the kind of doing it for free or, working every hour because you
Yeah.
really care actually can be quite exploitative of us. And I think that's a lesson that also needs to be learned and has been learnt, and particularly in this day and age, which I'm sure we'll talk about further.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
knowing the value of your creativity and your input has become increasingly important. So
Mm.
I think I would say with a pinch of salt, those music
Yes.
videos are a very good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So going back to commercials, obviously you work on a
Mm,
wide range of genres, but we're here to talk about commercials, and
yeah.
I'd love to know about how you start in pre-production on a commercial. What's the process?
Quite often these days you receive a director's treatment and an agency boards or treatment, and you kind of go through it and just try to work out how how realistic it is in the time, because you certainly don't know what the budget is at that point, but you might have an indication of what the schedule will be. And quite often schedules are locked because they've got air dates or they've got a start that they want to use, or I don't know, there'll be some window that they have to hit, and you start channeling towards that and you kind of make an assessment based on that. And then quite often you have a chat with the director and producer very early on. Now, that can vary because some commercials directors are literally doing 6 commercials at once, and others are less so. So in terms of their bandwidth and ability to talk to you and to actually for you to glean what it is that everyone is after, it is a very sort of tends to be quite a small window of opportunity.
Hmm. It's very different compared to, doing a TV drama or a major motion picture, for example. But what I
Very much so.
absolutely love about your some of the work that you do in prep is your absolutely stunning visuals, and I'm particularly the drawings. And I'm really curious to know, are you old school? Do you like to use pencil and paper, or is it all digital for you?
Yeah, there's nothing faster than pencil and paper, just having that around on your desk or wherever. I mean, I do draw and paint digitally. I model in 3D. A lot of my concept work has come out of that, but principally, what I find really useful is like if we're having a conversation now, we were talking about a commercial or a film or whatever, I'd probably be doodling away. If I'm reading a script or I'm reading a treatment, I'll doodle away in the margins, and that begins to be the kernel of the idea, and which is even more important actually on commercials because you have so little time. You have to kind of get to the point pretty quickly, unlike film and TV where there is a bit more time to explore.
Hmm.
But so and that's why drawing for me is a fast way, very fast way in, as well as referencing and using with the old mood boards and what have you, gathering that. But I like to do as much of that myself and absorb
Hmm.
it rather than getting a researcher. I have used researchers in the past for bigger scale jobs, but I kind of prefer to do that myself because then I know the kind of language and grammar of what it is we're trying to convey.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the skill of drawing is so crucial to what we do. And I also went to art school, but I was horrified to hear that these days they don't teach drawing at art school anymore.
Yeah, it's funny. Even when I was at art school, it was optional. It was we had to choose to do it, and of course, when you're a student, you don't know what what the skill set is. You could take a guess. You don't really know. So I think a bit of guidance with it, and I think the ability to draw. I mean, it's something that I grew up with, right? I would sit at home. My dad would bring back old printer paper. The stuff. I forget what it's called, the green and white stuff, and that you'd have
Yes. What was it
piles of
called?
that stuff, and just draw on the back of it or draw on the front of it if it didn't have any printout on it, because it was cheap, and it came out of poverty really because there was nothing else, and I didn't have access to paint back then, didn't have digital tools, didn't exist back then. It was just literally just whatever implement, pen, pencil, crayon, and a piece of paper, and you just crack on. And I think it for me, it's that direct relationship between your mind's eye, your imagination, and being able to get something out from yourself and express something. And mark making is something that I really enjoy, and I love that in fine art as well.
Mm, mm,
Um, and for the idea of it being taught, I think it's definitely a really useful skill to have. And if anything, when I was designing a film, I had my big digital setup and I had my analog setup, and I'd literally have the producer and director sitting next to me, rapt, watching me draw as we're talking about an idea, and they can see it evolving and coming to life. And in a way, that's it sold.
yeah.
Everything else really, like the big visuals that we were doing to the studio and what have you, they were so convinced of the idea because they saw it evolve in front of their eyes
Yes.
via me, that in a way a lot of the heavy lifting is on. Now listen, you don't really get those opportunities even on commercials or film these days to actually sit down, and that's something about the evolution of work and business. But I really, I do recommend it to students. I do recommend it certainly into my art departments. When I've got people there who are like, well, what can I learn? What can I do? Like, just draw. Whether you think you're good or bad is irrelevant.
Yeah.
But being able to articulate something from seeing to translating, you know, and that communication is I think really it's a really important discipline to learn of yourself. I find it hugely useful
Mm, that's
and
brilliant.
enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. So going from analog to digital,
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your kind of digital workflow and the day-to-day apps that you use in your job.
The reason why the reason why I went digital was actually when I moved from just doing commercials into film and TV. I walked into this art department and they laughed at me because I came in. I had a computer, but I had like brushes, pens, rulers, ellipse guides.
Hmm.
They were laughing at me because they're like, "Well, you gonna paint your ideas? Like, yeah, you're gonna draw? Yeah, I'm gonna draw them." And they're like, "Okay." So I then learned 3D, and the go-to one again at the time it was cost driven, but really, and SketchUp was my entry level 3D.
Yeah.
And actually I became pretty proficient at it. Um, Less so in terms of, funnily enough, less so in terms of the art direction side of translating it into drawings, more
Hmm.
so in terms of actually the visuals side of things. And then over the more recent years, Blender is my go-to. So Blender and SketchUp. And I'm using Twinmotion, which is an Unreal Archviz. 2D packages, I use Photoshop. Sometimes I use Sketchbook Pro. Sometimes I use Coral Painter, but mainly Photoshop for drawing, painting, digital drawing.
Mm.
And just copy paper. People always ask me, I did a job with Ridley Scott. He's like, what pen are you using? It's like, it's just a fucking pen, Ridley. And he laughed. He's famous for his rose rings, right? And his Ridley grams.
Yeah.
And I got on very well with him because we just sat there drawing, pitching a job together. It was a big a film
Yeah.
we did. But no, I just pick up whatever pens or paper is, layout paper, because I used to just have a light box and you just onion skin up. So if anyone doesn't know what that is, you're literally just tracing what animators do from an idea and you iterate, which might sound
It's like
hugely
it's like using
antiquated.
layers. It's like using layers
It's,
in Photoshop.
it's exactly like, but I do both. So yeah, it's exactly like using layers in Photoshop. Except you don't have with a big pile of paper. But I did one film where I forced myself to only draw with a pen on paper because it was the fastest way of getting out ideas. It was
Yeah.
faster than anyone was doing it digitally, because they needed ideas. So yeah, wanted to
Nice.
have.
Cool. But so let's talk about this project in
Yeah.
particular. How do you go about building the world, and what was your inspiration? I love hearing that you wanted to be an astronaut. So
Yeah.
apt.
Yeah. So Susanna White, who's the director, who's absolutely lovely, and Emma Cairns, who's a producer from RSA, who's lovely too, and I've known for years. And it initially started off as, Will, could you design us a spaceship? I'm like, oh God, I'm getting known as the spaceship guy. I get asked this quite a lot. And you know what, I'm not knocking it. Yes, of course I can. And we got partway into the project, like, what are you doing here? And like, oh, we've got to design this thing, the spaceship's got to go to Mars, and we're using virtual production and we're using the volume. And I'm like, do you know anything about the volume? Not really, but we know it's like, people are chasing it. I said, well, just have a look again at my CV. I've done like some big projects using it. So it came out of that, and also the fact that Susanna wanted to do a spaceship interior that was not hyper real, was a bit more feminine, a little bit more um, stylistic. The reference was 2001, which obviously gets referenced quite a lot. Uh, not as gritty as Alien, um, but had nods and cues to some of that. And also scale wise, she didn't want it to be a realistic scale. When my first version was more like the ISS, like an 8 foot diameter interior. We ended up making something much bigger. And, which kind of freaked out everyone else because they're like, that's really big. I'm like, well, it's what Susanna wants, and I get what she's doing. She wanted this balletic,
Yeah.
zero G, just she wanted it to breathe, basically.
Yes.
And again, it's that translation exercise of the literal into the visual. And sometimes you can make a literal translation, and sometimes it can be something that's more felt. And she wanted to convey a feeling. And she was great to work with. I mean, this as a designer. When you're working with a great producer and a great director and a great DP, we had John Matheson. He was great to work with.
Mm.
Having that triumvirate for me to be part of. Well, collectively we are. That's the difference. That's when a job, the commercial, yeah, is a commercial, right? But the relationship and the fun, and the kind of hard work, which is still there's the back and forth with agency, client, and what have you. I mean, they were cock a hoot, which was lovely to see. Really nice to see when people walk onto something and
Yeah.
they're like, wow,
Yes.
and are genuinely amazed, and they love it, and that's a really wonderful feeling. So yeah, it was just trying to create something which had its own softer look to it, really, a
Mm.
warmth to it.
Nice. And you mentioned the DOP. I'm interested to know how that collaboration works between production designer and DOP because it's such a crucial part of the whole visual identity of a
Yeah.
production.
Well, it just so happened that because I did those drawings, and also I did a SketchUp model, but in the drawing there's enough of an idea of where the lights are, the Astera lights, or what we used to call it, just tube lights. So I knew that's how I wanted to light it, and I did some boards and showed them to Susanna. She's like, "That's cool." So she wanted this sort of softer bit at the end. I went, "Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have these big soft kind of cushions, but I'm going to put more lights between them. So you're going to have a very graphic but warm cocoon-like." And I've had this with a couple of DPs in the past. If you show them a decent rendering, or even a decent enough rendered sketch, they know where the lights are. Right? Well, you're
Mm.
lit. I'm like, you've done it. You've already done it. You put the lights in the set, and the key bit that my point back to John was, hey, but we've got to put Mars outside, right? There's space, but as soon as you get close to Mars and we're above Mars, you're going to have all that Martian light. And he was really smart. He put I don't know what it was, an 8K or a 10K or whatever equivalent, on a small boom outside with a huge hairy grip on one end, and just floated this thing up and down. The grip looked like, no, the spark looked like Frank Zappa. It was amazing. It was really cool. But yeah, so he had this beautiful light. So you had this feeling of floating because what the light was doing outside relative to the static lights inside. And so that was just in terms of that key set. And then we had one, two, a couple. How many? We had three, I think, volume loads as well to light, John, I don't think had done any volume work before, so I kind of did a lot of hand holding with that. I don't think he was a fan of the volume. I'm really not a fan of it either. But again, I had to say to the producer and to the DP, and sorry, the producer and director, to Emma and to Susanna at the beginning, listen, can I just stomp all over VFX and lead on this rather than have to go, I've really got to lead because in the time frame that you've got, I think we had like 8 weeks prep and then had obviously a bit of post as well. But if you're going to do volume work, it's all in the prep. So I said, listen, I've got to own those designs. I've got to show stuff back to you, but also to client and agency. And I'm really happy to present to them what the process is here because it's not my choice that we're using the volume, it's their choice. And this is how we should do it. And to be fair to them, they listened and they embraced it. And I've had a very different experience on a much, much, much bigger scale. We're like, we want to use the volume. I'm like, don't use the volume. It's really not for you. You know, it's gonna cost you a load of money. You're not going to be ready for it. And that was on a huge scale, and that was painful.
Mm.
So I actually the joy here was people listening and embracing, and they really wanted, again, they were really happy with the team that they had managed to garner for their endeavor. So I
Mm.
think that helped in terms of the listening side.
Yeah.
And also, I found John really easy to work with. He's very clear to the point of being blunt, which I am too, which is useful because you shortcut to here's the good bits.
Yeah.
Right, now we can go and have some fun.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. And Susanna is just delightful, and Emma really, really helped smooth out all the bumps, the stuff around from the outside, some really good producing going on there.
Mm.
So yeah, it made it fun.
Nice. I mean, that's another question I was going to ask you. There's so many layers of approval on a commercial that you don't get
Right.
in film or TV.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that when you're not just presenting your design pitch to a director? There's
Yeah,
an
it's a
agency
really
and
it's a really good question because again that varies, and I think you just I'm making an assessment of the director and the producer very quickly to see what sort of people that they are like and what sort of process they are in, because some directors will own it. They will own it. They will defend you. They will defend their vision. They will be articulate. They will articulate what it is that they're trying to convey. There are others who are just like, over to you, and you'll be under a bus before you even know it. And you're just making that assessment. So I then build a kind of case based off my best guess of who these people are that I'm working with. So you sometimes have to do a little bit more in order to, in inverted commas, protect yourself, which is a dumb game, but it's unfortunately part of the game. Because it's just wasteful. And exasperating. But you pick up skills along the way as well. And then you have other times like this time where we were given a whole load of images and stuff, and a lot of it was very generative AI stuff. And I said, say, well, you're not going to. First of all, I don't like the aesthetics. Do you really like these aesthetics? Is that what you're really after? Well, no, not really. Okay, fine. So let's just put all that aside. So tonally, is this what you're trying to achieve? And it's a conversation, and I'm showing back some either real world references, things that actually exist, or filmic references where they've actually made something and not generative stuff for a start. And then to understand the tone and taste, also known as toast. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. You're trying to do that at speed. Whereas there are some other directors where you're just basically going to have to throw everything at it and give them a kind of a wish list of everything, and then you then just have to go through this laborious process of whittling it down, and the financial reality and the time reality, and the producer will then have to step in and go yes, no, as opposed to being more building it from the ground up. It's more reductive.
Mm.
Different processes for different people, for different timescales, for different budgets.
Yeah, yeah. And you've spoken about the volume aspect to this. For people that
Mhm.
don't know about virtual production, could you give us a little kind of insight into what it is, what it does, and how you use it as a production
Sure.
designer?
So first of all, separate out the volume and volume work from virtual production. Virtual production is simply a form of essentially pre-visualization, which is also known as previs, which has been a separate thing in and of itself for many years, mainly used in features, but also used in some TV and commercials, where you are pre-visualizing the world in which you're going to be inhabiting, whether it's actually sets and stage space or locations or digital spaces. The volume is basically a series of LED screens, whether it's in a horseshoe shape or a flat version or a semi-flat. In fact, the one we ended up using in Bulgaria was not. I'd used the biggest one in Europe when I did a Marvel film, was the ILM one, which is huge horseshoe. Um, I say huge, it wasn't that big, and that's part of the problem. But the one that we had was a much smaller scale version of. You have to worry. There's all sorts of technical things which we won't get into, but in terms of pixel pitch and rigging points and all of that, as well as tracking. And the volume simply means that you can load in backgrounds or extensions of your physical set into the distance and the backgrounds where the camera will track it and it will look like you are in that environment. So the theory goes. And it does work up to a point, but it's emissive, which means it's casting light back into the space. It requires the designs to have been designed and then converted and built. So much like you would build in plaster, paint, wood, metal, you have to build digitally to build the load to then work. And then sometimes you have to build versions of that load depending on what the setups are or directions that you'll be looking in. So I think what we are seeing in the industry at large, film, TV, commercials, what have you, is the decline of volume work, and that's moved more into like live and sports and weather and occasionally like cockpits, car windows, all that sort of stuff. And it's really great for that sort of stuff. And much smaller stuff like, if you were trying to do end of day, beginning of day, sunrise, sunset, campfire, not a lot of motion in terms of movement of people. I think one of the best uses or better uses of it was probably 1899 in terms of that TV show. Um, but we've definitely seen a decline of those volume stages. However, virtual production is something which I think is coming more and more and has been for many years because we've been doing it in the art department where we are basically pre-visualizing. We pre-visualize anyway. We make models, right? If you make a 3D model of the set, you're doing that in order to make renderings and to understand the spaces, but also in order to exercise to get out drawings to the construction team, right? But at the same time, when you have concept artists or other people or handing over to previous, you're pre-visualizing what that world is, and quite more often than not, in the art department, we're extending beyond and thinking about the world beyond. And like in this commercial, I'm having to think about the physical set, the digital set, the set that post-production VFX are going to be making beyond. So my job is to think about everything that's going to be seen on the screen, right? That's kind of the job. Whether a production has the bandwidth, money, time, willingness to allow the production designer to get on with the job is something else, and that's a different conversation.
Mm.
But 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 essentially, the production designer, in my view, is there to kind of own that and tell everyone what it's going to look like. And virtual production allows you has brought the digital tool sets into the art department in order to do that.
It's really fascinating, and that difference between a real art department and a virtual art department. The ones that are responsible for the virtual part of it. It's really
Yeah,
interesting where
but
that
it's
divide is.
interesting to have that crossover. I worked on this big film and we had a virtual art department who were basically just dealing with the content for the screens.
Yeah.
But they had no idea, absolutely no idea how to make a film. They had
Yes.
no idea where people were going to be standing, where lights were going to be, or and that integration. Whereas I had a pretty good idea from day one what it was going to be like. You just have to use your imagination, your mind's eye.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of its failings in terms of volume work. However, virtual production tool sets and giving those tools to the hands of art directors, assistant art directors, people who also understand the filmmaking aspects, who go and talk to the different departments, right? So I'm working with a DOP, I'm working with a director, I'm working with a producer, I'm working with a stunt coordinator, I'm working, you name it, VFX, all of those people. But some of those tool sets now, this is what I mean, is that within the art department itself, lots of art directors now are using Unreal, Twinmotion. They can set up cameras, they can actually, you know, if the DP doesn't know what camera back it is or what lenses are going to be, well, they can actually put that into their workflow and say, well, I've chosen this. We know it's not what you're going to be doing, but at least you can talk the same language and go, but this is what this is based off of, for example,
Mm,
and then
mm,
you can plug all that in due course. But essentially, the art department is building the world from day one, and virtual production just allows you to continue to do that into the digital space.
yeah.
And whether that digital space is actually on set, i.e. LED screens, or whether you've got people in mocap suits, or just a ball and a stick, right through to final pixel, final frame. I mean, art department doesn't do that. That's very much VFX. I think in terms of the design, I'm seeing more time being spent for designers to design the thing so that the VFX teams then know what the design is to implement that into and render it, light it, track it to whatever the shots are, which is what
Mm,
VFX have been doing for many years. They're not, you know, they're not designing it. And I think there's been a bit of back and forth on that over the years. And
mm.
I think it's always worthwhile to continue whatever that vision is through.
I feel like there's a whole other podcast just
It's a whole other
dedicated to.
podcast.
No, I mean I think it's fascinating, and I've heard you talking about VFX and the art department workflow before, and it's absolutely fascinating, and I think it would be a great
Yeah,
idea
no,
for a
and it's getting
podcast.
better. I mean, it's interesting. It's really interesting because people are beginning to understand one another's jobs more as well.
Yeah, yeah. And just specifically back to this job, how
Mm.
did you create the kind of zero G gravity feel?
That was easy. So no, it was basically it's wire work essentially and camera work, old-fashioned camera work. Dutching the camera, moving the lights, as I was talking about. Because if you've got static inside, but you move everything outside, it gives you that sensation of pitching and rolling and what have you. But also as part of the set design, I got it into a headset in mixed reality. I used a platform called Noor, which I developed with a friend of mine, Federico, so that we could put it into the headset and show Susanna and our stunt coordinator how big the set was. And I pretty much guessed where, I don't know if it was in the presentation, but I pretty much guessed what, it's going to be a track here because they tend to be linear,
Hmm.
and there's going to be a track crossing it there, and they're going to be on a harness there, or they're going to be on a tuning fork. So therefore, we need to float this wall here to punch out that way. We always knew that the fourth wall would never exist because we never looked that way. So you can always punch through that way. So we could then show them and show what a person would look like floating in that space. Um, and what that meant was, again, the director, Susanna, was very clear and very happy that she knew that she'd be able to get those shots. Stuntmans knew, and they were very clear that they could achieve those shots. So that's kind of not job done, but that clarity at that stage in pre-production becomes important because there are other things that you need to think about. Susanna needs to think about performance. She needs to think about these other things. So it's like just trying to go down your checklist and go, yeah, that's how we're going to do zero G.
Nice. And you mentioned that this was shot in Bulgaria.
Yes.
What were there any kind of difficulties or practicalities of filming on a stage in Bulgaria, or what were your biggest challenges on this particular job?
I think the biggest challenge was trying to achieve really good finishes. I having been lucky enough to work in the UK for many years and seeing the excellence, that so many departments within art department, set deck construction, and all the other affiliates, right down to like people that will make saddles for you. So trying to get those high end finishes was I knew was always going to be a problem because again, you're doing it A on a tight timeline, B on a tight budget, and so you're doing it in stages and spaces which aren't necessarily cut out for that. So, for example, I went down to stage one day. They were still constructing the set, but they were also spraying up panels there. I'm like, that is not going to work because all the crap in
Yeah.
the atmos, or the sawdust literally is just going to land on the spray painting and you're not going to get smooth finishes. You'll be there you could be sanding way beyond the shoot and you still won't have a really nice slip. So I just said, right, they didn't have a spray shop on site. So, well, I said to the local producer, we just going to have to open up another stage, put them on there. And they did it, to be fair. They did it. They listened and they got on with it because I just went, well, it's just not good enough because it needs to look like this. So that was probably the biggest challenge. And listen, I'm sure you've been there many a time. It's that squeaky bum of we're getting to pre-light and there's still people with nail guns and paint buckets walking around, right? And it was a bit like that.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, well, yeah, we're building you a big spaceship. What do you think it was going to be? And again, everyone's really patient, and that's
Yeah.
that's trust. And you know, I think you could see the nerves, you could feel the nerves, less so on my part, but more for everyone else. Because
Yeah.
again, a great local art director and his team, you could see that they were really on it and they really wanted to do a good job.
Mm.
And I don't mean that in a patronizing way
No,
either.
no, sure.
But they,
Was that your first time filming in Bulgaria?
was that my first or second? I forget.
Mm.
Might remember that.
How do you go about finding good crew locally that you've never met before?
Ask lots of questions. Just ask lots of questions. Ask around. Ask other designers. Get on the phone. Pick up the phone. Look at work, but get on the phone and just go, right, who do you recommend? So yeah, Emil, who I've used out there a couple of times, I would absolutely go, yeah, I want him.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think just that kind of old school, who's good, and
Yeah.
ask around. Just
Mm.
ask.
And what are your thoughts on the kind of current trends in commercials? Do you feel that they're having the budget squeeze that every other genre seems to be having, or do you think there's still some big players out there that want to spend a lot of money on their commercials? Has it changed over the
Um,
years?
I think, well, first of all, I think that a lot of people are just a lot of clients, agents who are making assessment, do commercials even work? One, and two, if they think they do work under certain circumstances, yeah, what are they? Therefore the budget ranges and the people they attract. In fact, was just meant to be doing a commercial and it just fell apart for me the other day. But I looked at it and just went, I think it needs to be done like this. And they'd locked in 2 weeks to do a really big build. I'm like, that's not to really high end finishes. I'm like, that's just simply not realistic. There are other like, oh, can we do it with green screen? I'm like, well, you can, but you still got to sit on something, walk up to something. You can do it with proxies. There are ways of doing it, but it's just not going to look as good. And your whole treatment is based around selling quality, and it's not going to be quality. But again, some people don't care about quality. So again, you're trying to constantly make this assessment
Yeah.
as to what it is that you're getting into. Um, I think there are still people, brands out there on the commercial side who do make good things and want to do good stuff. And I think there is this divergence happening between slop,
Yeah.
this catch-all term, which is generally associated with generative AI over here, and more curated, thoughtful, um, beautiful work.
Mm. And obviously AI, big topic. How do you see that affecting our industry?
What it already is. I mean, the number of pitch decks that I've seen, whether on features or commercials, where someone, whether it's a creative director or whether it's a director, or invariably the director's assistant or someone who writes a treatment,
Yeah.
who's called in, who's really fast, they can put all this stuff together, and broadly speaking, a lot of it is junk.
Yeah.
You can't you haven't got any you don't own the IP on any of it. In the way that we showed mood boards, we don't own the IP on those things
Sure.
because other people's photographs, maybe it's just intention. But the point that they don't seem to get is that intention now, because it's a finished in inverted commas thing, that somehow I want that. It's like, we can't have that because you don't own that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's
And
there's that
do you
an
think people
aspect.
will realize that and
Well, they
the
ought to.
industry will realize that and they'll gradually start shying away from it? Or do you think it's just going to become
No,
ever more pervasive?
no, but it depends. But so here's the thing, right? It's those tool sets. Listen, you can have all sorts of different conversations with all sorts of different people at all sorts of different grades, as to whether people want to use it or don't like use it.
Yeah.
First and foremost, having a common understanding of what these large language models and image models actually are. Most of them, if not all of them, were built, what, 4 or 5 years ago, and I played with some of the early ones. The training data was scraped from the internet, so they didn't have anyone's permissions for a start, right? Then, of course, we then get to now, and you kind of move on, and it's very unrealistic, perhaps, to undo that, right? The kind of genie's out of the bottle. But at the same time, governments and businesses are having to legislate, or will have to legislate, and certainly studios are having to come up with their own legislation, because some of them have realized that they will get caught out and have seen their own IP. People like myself, and there's loads of people who'd say to the studios, hey, look at this generative AI stuff. You need to protect yourselves from this, because you're just going to these people are just going to walk away with your IP. Yeah, you don't need to worry about that. Okay, fine. It's happening.
That's
That said,
interesting.
some of that generative stuff and some of the AI tools, have been around for some time in VFX. So whether it's kind of rotoscoping or certain parts of workflows.
Yeah.
And again, I think there are certain things, I've looked at certain tool sets where I can take my drawings and put it in and it'll render it for me. Whether I like that rendering or not, I can paint over it or it gives me a base.
Yeah.
Is that any different to what I'm doing now, where I build stuff from scratch in 3D and then I then choose the lighting and render it? It's accelerating that process, right? So you get stuff back quickly and you get quantity back if you want it. So in terms of iterations, but at some point you still have to make a choice, over it, and that's part of the argument that lots of advocates of it will say, well, yeah, but you're still making a choice. I'm like, yeah, sure, but the foundation blocks of it aren't.
Mm,
So there's that, and then there's the how does it work for me in my workflow, and broadly, how does it work as in the business? And I think the business is still trying to work that out. I don't think it's going to be interesting to see. There are lots of like mini AI studios who are making films and using generative and we'll see what the products are like. I mean, all the stuff that I see on Instagram and what have you, it's trash.
yeah.
Are there some really funny skits, like the guy that goes around and kind of corrects Game of Thrones scenes, right?
Yes.
Knocks out the bad guy.
Seen that.
I think it's hilarious,
Yeah.
and that's great. And more power to him. And it's great. It's great. It's great advertising for Game of Thrones. Maybe they'll sell a few more. Not even sell DVDs. No one buys them. But you know what I mean. Sparks an interest in Game of Thrones again. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in terms of like making work, artists, creators, human beings make work. We make work. We make that sort of stuff. And I think it kind of goes back to your point about pop videos and that lesson. Well, we have to also learn the lesson that, it is our creativity, it is our labor. These are our ideas that we're all working with, as well as the other creators that we collaborate with, right?
Mm, mm,
And I think the working models will change, and the nature of work is changing. So perhaps it gets closer to a more theatre model where we are more seen as collaborators
mm,
with a director, a dramaturg, a producer, a writer. The designer is part of, very much integrated into that, and seen as, and also, financially, I mean, has more clout in a way. I mean, the budgets are way, way, way smaller, but but it, from my understanding, your fees are more in keeping with that collaboration.
Mm.
So I don't know. I think we're witnessing those sorts of changes, and we're in a moment of flux.
And
And
what
I think
would,
the best thing. Hmm?
so no, sorry, you carry on.
No,
Interrupted
no,
you.
no. I just think the best thing you do is just work out how you want to work. You can chase things, and that's fine. And I understand the idea of being left behind in vertical development, but I don't think it's being left behind at all. Trying to understand what these tools are, and by all means, use them, but know what they are in the full knowledge of what they are if you use them, right? I know what a pen is, I know what a pencil is, I know what Photoshop is, and even Photoshop's changing, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So I think it's being alert to those things, and being alert to what's being asked of you as a designer.
Mm.
What is it that you're contributing towards? Um,
So what advice would you give to young people starting or wanting to start out in the industry? Because some people are saying the industry's finished. Don't bother trying to get into it. There won't be any jobs for you in the future.
I think I think there's an element of truth in that. I hate to admit it, but I think there is an element of truth in that. But I don't think it should crush your creativity. I don't think it should crush that inspiration that you may draw from, whether it's, I remember we used to watch certain ads, Tony K ads back in the day, and
Yeah.
early Jonathan Glazer
Art
stuff.
forms. Yeah.
Still, yeah, which are art forms in and of themselves. Ridley stuff, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
You go back, there's definitely art form in it. There's
Yeah.
definitely inspiration in it, and there still is in film, there still is in TV, there still is in music videos. There are some great practitioners out there, some great artists, creators, some great collaborations that still go on. And if you feel that you have got that, find your people early, is what I would say to students. Make stuff together. I can't stress that enough about, if you want to work in that collaborative medium, or if you're sat in your bedroom and you can do it all in Blender, then crack on. Because again, there's some amazing stuff that people are making,
Yeah.
and you just don't know where it's going to land. And you won't know until you make it. Getting it seen is another thing, but as we know, we live in this digital age. So showing stuff, there's more stuff to see. So cutting through it has become harder, but it's not impossible. But I think it's about knowing that value of what it is that you want to make. And that's what I would
Mm.
say to you. And then learn the tools, whether it's drawing, painting, learning 3D, whatever it is, and being alert to the new, but also learn from the old. I don't think one, as I have in my own practice, I try and span both camps. I'm not exclusive about it. I'm
Yeah.
sort of technology agnostic, really, in the way that I'm pen, pencil, paper agnostic. I just want to make stuff. I want to create things. I like working, believe it or not, with other human beings on
Yeah.
occasion.
No, that's great. I mean, just to kind of wrap this up, and we kind of touched on it already, really, but just your kind of final thoughts on the future of the industry, because clearly it's not just going to go away and fade away into nothing. But I'd love to know your insight into how you
Yeah.
think the next 10, maybe 10 years of the industry is going to look.
Well, if you're talking about the specifics of commercials and advertising, then I think it's changing so rapidly. And I think we haven't possibly imagined yet, or maybe there's some amazing stuff happening. I'm playing with stuff in mixed reality and how you can experience things, and it may not be just via a two-dimensional screen. Um, there's a lot happening in the live arena where there's a sort of cross-pollination that's going on right now. I think for broadly in film and TV, again, I think film and TV as art forms will continue to exist, as does painting, as does sculpture,
Yeah.
as does graphic design. I remember, like, if you go back to the early 90s, the boom in graphic design,
Yeah.
then the terminal decline by 2000 and whatever it was, you know. But there's still some great
The
graphic
advent of
design.
clip art.
Yeah, right. Well, but also even now with like generative and AI, and it's just remixing and what have you. But there's still some really talented people making some really beautiful things
Yeah.
and challenging things too. Not everything has to be beautiful per se. It can be challenging, right? Is there a future for film and TV? Yeah, absolutely. There's a film. There's a future for it. Is it going to be as broad as it has been? Yes, it will be broad, but I think it will broadly be two camps. It will be a lot of slot and a lot of really interesting things, and we're just going to become more discerning as to which camp we want to buy into, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Brilliant. All right. Well, look, let's wrap that up. That was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for talking to us, Will.
Thank you.
Really, really enjoyed it. And
Thanks, Jonathan.
I'm sure the viewers will too.
Oh, well, jolly good. Excellent. Well, thanks for asking me along. I really appreciate it. Thanks for
Not
the
at all.
award. It's really good.